The courtroom doors felt heavier than they should have, like they were pushing back, not because of the wood, because of the months behind them. My fingers tightened around the edge of my laptop, old, scuffed, the hinge held together with a strip of black tape. I bought it after I was fired. It was what I could afford once my savings started bleeding out. One bill at a time. I took a breath and stepped inside. That's when I saw him. Elliot Graves, CEO of Northbridge Systems, my former boss. He sat at the plaintiff's table in a tailored charcoal suit. Relaxed. Confident. Already victorious in his mind. His attorney leaned in, whispering something that made Elliot smile. Then Elliot looked up. At me. At my laptop. At the empty chair beside me. And he laughed. Not loudly, not rudely, just enough to let me know exactly what he thought of my chances. I understood the message instantly. You came alone. You're finished. A few people in the gallery glanced my way. Then back to Elliot's legal team, 3 attorneys. Neat stacks of documents. The quiet arrogance of people who always speak first. Elliot didn't bother hiding his amusement. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes following me as I walked to the defense table. I didn't look away. I set my laptop down. Carefully, inside my bag were 3 folders, blue, red, and yellow, each one labeled, indexed, and backed up. Elliot had no idea what was in them, no idea how the last 3 weeks had unfolded, no idea what I'd found when I finally stopped panicking and started reading. Before all this, I never wanted a courtroom. I built systems. I fixed problems. I stayed late. I wrote the backbone of Northbridge's core software, while Elliot pitched it as his vision. When he fired me, he called it restructuring. 2 weeks later, a courier delivered the real message, a lawsuit. Non-compete violation. Intellectual property theft. He wasn't just trying to silence me. He was trying to erase me. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. Elliot's smile stayed exactly where it was. For now. Because he still thought I was here to defend myself. He had no idea I'd come to tell the truth. How did that moment land with you, if it stirred something heavy or familiar? You're not alone. Stories like this tend to hit places we don't always talk about. If you can, try stepping over to a window and notice one small detail around you. It helps reset the noise inside your head. Where are you listening from right now? I'd genuinely love to know. If this story feels like one you want to stay with, subscribing is a quiet way to walk the rest of it together, because what happened after that laugh in the courtroom is where everything truly began to change. The judge adjusted her glasses and glanced down at the file, then back up at me. Ms. Bloom, are you represented by counsel? None, Your Honor. I said. I'm representing myself. A ripple moved through the room, not shock, curiosity. Elliot's lawyer didn't bother hiding his smile. Elliot leaned back, satisfied, as if the case had already ended. The judge nodded once. Very well, plaintiff may proceed. Elliot's lead attorney stood, straightened his jacket, and walked forward with the confidence of someone used to unchallenged narratives. He spoke smoothly about contracts, about loyalty, about how Northbridge Systems had generously employed me before I violated trust. Emails appeared on the screen, carefully selected, stripped of context, lines of code, presented as if they had magically appeared under Elliot's leadership. I listened, quietly. He described me as difficult, emotional, replaceable, a former employee trying to profit from company property. Elliot didn't look at me. He didn't need to. In his mind, I was already gone. When the attorney finished, the judge turned toward me. Misty Bloom. Your response. I stood. The room felt different when I moved less confident, more alert. I opened the blue folder and handed copies to the clerk. This, I said, keeping my voice level, is the original patent filing for the algorithm Northbridge is claiming ownership of. The judge scanned the first page. Her brow tightened. It was filed during my employment. I continued. But not under the company's name. Elliot's chair scraped against the floor. The judge looked up. Under whose name was it filed? Mine. I said, Marcia Bloom, sole inventor. Silence hit the room like a held breath. Elliot's attorney stepped forward too quickly. Your Honor, the company retains full rights. This must be an administrative oversight. The judge didn't look at him. She looked at the document. Do you have a signed assignment transferring ownership to the company? His pause was short, but it was real. We can provide that. He said, You haven't. The judge replied, I opened the red folder. I contacted the patent office personally. There is no record of assignment, no transfer, no amendment. The ownership was never completed. The clerk passed the confirmation letter forward. Elliot's face changed, not panic yet, but confusion, the kind that comes when something foundational starts to crack. I wasn't finished. Northbridge's non-compete applies only to company-owned intellectual property. I said, This algorithm was never company-owned. The judge leaned back slightly. So, she said, turning to Elliot, you sued an employee for work she legally owns for the first time. Elliot looked at me, not laughing, not smiling. And suddenly, the courtroom didn't feel like his anymore. Most people skim this paragraph, but you don't. Right? Elliot's attorney recovered first. He always did, Your Honor, he said quickly, even if ownership is disputed. Intent matters. Ms. Bloom had access to sensitive systems. She knew the company relied on that algorithm. Her actions caused measurable harm. I almost smiled. The judge didn't respond right away. She tapped her pen once against the bench, then turned to me. Ms. Bloom, did you remove or distribute company data after your termination, no, Your Honor? I said, and I can prove it. I opened the yellow folder. These are commit logs. I continued. Every line of code I wrote, every version, every timestamp, all authored before my termination. Nothing was copied afterward. Nothing was taken. The judge reviewed the pages slowly, methodically. Elliot shifted in his seat. But there's more, I said. And this explains why we're really here. I paused not for drama, but because the next part mattered. 2 nights before this hearing, while reviewing my archived work files, I found documents saved during my final week at Northbridge. Documents I didn't create. Elliot's attorney shot to his feet. Objection, speculation, overruled. The judge said, Continue. I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen flickered once, then steadied. An internal slide deck appeared. Investor Assurance Strategy. I read aloud. Quarter 2 revision. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. This deck references my patented algorithm by name. I said, It describes it as fully owned by Northbridge Systems and critical to maintaining investor confidence. Elliot's jaw tightened. These projections, I continued, flipping slides, are tied directly to technology the company did not legally control. The judge leaned forward now. Ms. Bloom, she said, why is this relevant? Because this lawsuit wasn't about protecting intellectual property, I replied. It was about pressure. I clicked to the next document, Internal Audit Summary. I said, Conducted quietly, not disclosed to staff. The judge's eyes narrowed as she read. This indicates significant financial mismanagement, she said slowly. Yes, Your Honor. Failed funding rounds, clients preparing to exit, and investors threatening to withdraw unless full patent ownership was secured. The room felt colder. Elliot's attorney spoke again, his voice thinner. Your Honor, this is confidential corporate material. The plaintiff brought this case. The judge replied, If motive is relevant, so is this. I looked directly at Elliot for the first time since entering the room. He didn't sue me because I was a threat. I said calmly, He sued me because he was running out of time. Silence pressed down on the courtroom. The judge folded her hands. Mr. Graves, she said, are you telling this court that you filed this lawsuit without verifying ownership of the patent your company depends on? Elliot opened his mouth, closed it, for the first time. He looked smaller. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This case was never supposed to be fair. It was supposed to scare me. But fear had already done its worst, and it no longer worked. The judge removed her glasses and set them down slowly. The way people do when they want the room to understand that something has shifted. "Mr. Graves," she said, "you may respond." Elliot stood, then hesitated, as if his legs needed permission. His suit still fit perfectly, but the confidence inside it had collapsed. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the strain of someone trying to sound certain while standing on unstable ground. "Your Honor, this is being mischaracterized," he said. "Northbridge always intended to formalize ownership. Mrs. Bloom was a junior engineer. The patent filing was procedural, an oversight." I stayed still. The judge looked at him without expression. "An oversight lasting several years," Elliot swallowed. "The company was growing rapidly. Things fall through. They do," the judge said evenly. "But lawsuits do not fall through. They are deliberate." She turned to his attorney. "Counsel, did your firm verify patent ownership before filing this claim?" The attorney adjusted his glasses. "Buying time? We relied on representations made by our client." The judge nodded once. "That is not an answer." The courtroom felt different now, less formal, more alert. People leaned forward. Even the clerk had stopped typing. Elliot's attorney tried to regain control. "Your Honor, even if ownership was incomplete, Miss C. Bloom had a duty of loyalty. She knew the company's reliance on the algorithm." I spoke before the judge could. "Respectfully," I said, "loyalty does not transfer property." The judge allowed it. "I was loyal," I continued. "I worked nights. I fixed systems no one else understood. I warned leadership repeatedly that the patent assignment was unfinished. I was told it would be handled." Elliot flinched. "The day I was terminated," I said. "My access was cut within minutes. My badge deactivated. My work locked behind credentials I no longer had. Yet 2 weeks later, I received a lawsuit accusing me of taking what I could no longer reach." The judge's eyes sharpened. "That is inconsistent," she said. Elliot's attorney opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This case," I said, "was filed to intimidate me, to prevent me from working, to force me into silence while Northbridge reassured investors using an asset it did not own." The judge leaned back, hands folded. "Mr. Graves," she said quietly, "do you understand the seriousness of filing a claim based on unverified ownership while representing that ownership to investors?" Elliot stared at the table. I believed he began, "Belief." The judge interrupted, "Is not evidence." A silence followed, heavy, unavoidable. Then she turned to me. "Ms. Bloom," she asked, "are you seeking dismissal only? Or are you considering a counterclaim every eye in the room found me?" I paused not for effect, but because the answer mattered. "For now," I said, "I'm asking the court to see this case for what it is." The judge nodded slowly. "I believe I do," she said. And for the first time since I entered that courtroom, I knew the ground had finally shifted beneath Elliot's feet. There was something in the back that no one expected. The judge called for a short recess. Elliot stood immediately, whispering urgently to his attorney as they moved toward the door. His posture was rigid now, his steps sharp, like someone trying to outrun a thought. I stayed where I was, hands resting on the edge of the table, staring at nothing in particular while the room slowly emptied. When the courtroom cleared, the silence felt louder than any argument. I replayed the last few minutes in my head, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. Elliot hadn't planned for resistance. He'd planned for exhaustion, for fear, for me to fold quietly under the weight of legal pressure. That realization settled calmly in my chest. When the bailiff called us back, Elliot looked different, not defeated, alert. The judge returned and wasted no time. Before we proceed further, she said, I have a question that needs to be answered directly. She turned to Elliot. Mr. Graves, did you or did you not represent to investors that Northbridge Systems owned the patent in question? Elliot's attorney started to speak. The judge raised her hand. I asked Mr. Graves. Elliot cleared his throat. We presented the technology as core company IP. He said carefully, That was not my question. The judge replied, Did you state ownership a pause, just long enough? Yes, Elliot said. We did. The air changed. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to me. Ms. Bloom, do you have documentation supporting this claim? Yes, Your Honor. I connected my laptop again. Email summaries appeared on the screen. Investor briefing notes, language referencing secured ownership, exclusive rights, no outstanding claims. These materials were prepared internally. I said, They reference my patented work as company-owned. The judge examined them carefully. And at the time, she asked, ownership had not been transferred, remember I said. And Mr. Graves was aware of that. Elliot's attorney stood again, visibly tense. Your Honor, this line of questioning risks conflating civil issues with regulatory concerns. The judge looked at him sharply. Truth tends to do that. She leaned forward. Mr. Graves, she said, you filed a lawsuit alleging theft of intellectual property you did not own, while simultaneously assuring investors that you did. Elliot's face tightened. We were in negotiations to finalize negotiations do not equal ownership. The judge cut in. And the court does not exist to retroactively legitimize pressure tactics. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery. The judge turned to me again. Ms. Bloom, she said, I need to be clear. Are you asserting that this lawsuit was filed as leverage rather than legal remedy? Yes. Your Honor, I replied. That is exactly what I'm asserting. She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. Very well. She looked back at Elliot and his counsel. This court will take under advisement whether this case constitutes abuse of process. The words landed with precision. Elliot exhaled slowly, his composure thinning at the edges. He no longer looked amused. He looked measured, calculating. And for the first time, I understood something else just as clearly. If this case went any further, it wouldn't end quietly, because what had started as a lawsuit was now something much bigger, and Elliot knew it. The judge called the next phase without ceremony. No speeches, no warnings. Proceed, she said. Elliot's attorney stood again, but the rhythm was gone. He wasn't telling a story anymore. He was patching holes. Your Honor, he began, even if representations were made prematurely, intent matters. There was no malicious effort to mislead. Northbridge acted under time pressure, not deception. Time pressure. I recognized that phrase. Elliot used it constantly in meetings. Deadlines justify everything. Ethics later. The judge turned to me. Miss Bloom, do you wish to respond? Yes, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step forward. I stayed exactly where I was. Time pressure doesn't explain why I was terminated before any lawsuit was filed. I said, it doesn't explain why my access was revoked immediately, and it doesn't explain why a claim was made without a single attempt to verify ownership. Elliot stared straight ahead. There's one more thing, I continued, and this is the part that matters most. I opened a new document on my laptop. These are internal emails sent during my final week. I said, between Mr. Graves and senior leadership. The judge leaned in slightly. One message reads, I said carefully, if Bloom doesn't cooperate, legal pressure will limit her options. Another states, we need certainty before investors ask questions. Hey, Elliot's attorney was on his feet instantly. Your Honor, These communications are being taken out of context. The judge didn't look at him. Ms. Bloom, she said, were these emails sent before or after your termination before? I replied, 3 days before. That did it. The judge removed her glasses again. Slower this time. Mr. Graves, she said. You terminated an employee while discussing legal pressure to compel cooperation over an asset you did not own. Elliot finally looked up. That's not he started. The judge raised her hand. You have already answered enough questions. The room was silent, not tense, resolved. She turned to her notes, then back to both parties. This court is no longer evaluating a simple contract dispute, she said. We are examining conduct. Elliot's attorney spoke once more. Quietly, Your Honor, we request an opportunity to submit additional documentation. The judge shook her head. You had that opportunity when you filed this case. She looked at me again. Ms. Bloom, she said, you exercised restraint today. You could have escalated this immediately. Yes, I said, but I wanted the record to speak for itself. She nodded once. That restraint matters. Elliot's shoulders slumped. Just slightly, enough to notice. The judge closed the file in front of her. This court will issue a ruling shortly, she said. But I will say this now, what cannot be undone is the line that was crossed. Her gaze settled on Elliot. And that line, she continued, cannot be walked back with explanations. The gavel struck. Recess. As the room began to move again, I stayed seated for a moment, hands steady, heart calm, because whatever happened next. The truth had already landed. The courtroom emptied in fragments, chairs scraping, low whispers, the soft thud of doors closing. Elliot and his attorney moved quickly, heads bent together, their words sharp but contained. I stayed seated until the room thinned, until the weight in my chest settled into something steady. Outside the courtroom, the hallway smelled faintly of old paper and floor cleaner. I leaned against the wall, not from weakness, but from habit, for months. Fear had trained my body to brace for impact. Now there was no impact coming, just consequences. Slow and inevitable. Elliot stopped a few steps away. He didn't look at me at first. This didn't have to go this far, he said finally. Voice low, I met his eyes. It went exactly as far as it needed to. He exhaled through his nose. The sound tight. You could have handled this privately. I tried, I said. You filed a lawsuit. His jaw flexed. The hallway hummed with distant movement, another case being called. Another life-shifting tracks. Investors were asking questions. He said, the board wanted certainty. Certainty isn't something you invent. I replied, it's something you verify. For a moment. He looked tired, not defeated, exposed. The confidence that once filled rooms had drained, leaving only calculation. He glanced toward his attorney, who watched us from a distance, eyes warning. Think carefully, Elliot said. You don't want to make enemies. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. I didn't make this an enemy situation. I said, you did, when you tried to erase my name. His gaze flickered anger, then something like regret. He turned away without another word. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge was already seated. No preamble, no ceremony. I've reviewed the material submitted, she said, and I've considered the testimony. She looked directly at Elliot. This court finds that the plaintiff failed to establish ownership of the intellectual property in question and pursued this action without adequate verification. Elliot's attorney straightened, ready to object. The judge continued. Further, the evidence suggests this action may have been initiated as leverage rather than remedy. The word leverage landed hard. I'm dismissing the plaintiff's claims, she said, with prejudice. The gavel struck once, clean, final. A murmur rippled through the room, but I heard almost none of it. My hands trembled not with fear, but release. Months of pressure eased in a single breath. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Bloom," she said, "your restraint today was noted. The court encourages you to protect your rights moving forward." I nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor," as I packed my folders. Elliot didn't look up. His attorney whispered urgently, already calculating next steps that no longer mattered. I walked out into the afternoon light. The sky, unremarkable. The air, ordinary. And that was the most powerful part, because nothing about my life was ordinary again. And the silence behind me, where power had just broken, was louder than any laughter that came before. The courthouse steps were warm under the afternoon sun. I sat there longer than I expected to. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my body needed time to catch up with reality. For months, every decision had been shaped by survival. Now, survival was no longer the goal. My phone vibrated before I even stood up. One message turned into 3, then 6. Former colleagues, a quiet board assistant I barely knew, an engineer who had been laid off weeks after me. The pattern was unmistakable news, traveled faster than loyalty ever had. By the time I reached my car, the first headline had already surfaced. Northbridge Systems lawsuit dismissed amid ownership dispute. It wasn't dramatic. No accusations, no conclusions, just facts. And facts were dangerous. Within 48 hours, investors began asking questions Elliot couldn't redirect. The same patent he had claimed as settled was now a liability. Due diligence requests resurfaced. Funding conversations stalled. One major partner quietly suspended negotiations pending clarification. Clarification never comes quietly. A week later, a journalist reached out. Then another. I declined both. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to speak anymore. The record already had. Inside Northbridge, things unraveled with precision. Legal reviews expanded. Internal audits resurfaced. The board initiated an inquiry they called routine, which everyone understood was anything but. Elliot stopped appearing in public. His carefully curated confidence vanished from panels and interviews. When his name came up, it was always followed by a pause. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. Opportunities returned. Not flashy ones, thoughtful ones. A consulting request from a firm that actually asked about my process. A startup founder who wanted systems built right. Not fast. People who didn't see me as a risk, but as proof. One evening, I opened my laptop, the same battered one Elliot had laughed at, and drafted a simple plan. No grand announcements, no declarations, just a structure that gave me control again. I registered a small consultancy under my own name, Marcia Bloom. The first contract came through 2 weeks later, then another. I chose carefully, I worked deliberately, and for the first time in years, my work belonged to me fully, openly, without negotiation. 3 months after the ruling, Elliot resigned. The press release cited personal reasons. The board thanked him for his service. The phrasing was careful, rehearsed, empty. I read it once, then closed the tab. Because the story wasn't about his fall, it was about what remained after fear was stripped away. I hadn't won by destroying anyone. I'd won by refusing to disappear. And that quiet decision made in a courtroom where I was supposed to break changed everything that came next. Life didn't transform overnight. There was no dramatic pivot, no sudden applause. Instead, things settled slowly, deliberately into a new shape, one built on choice rather than urgency. My days became quieter, mornings without dread, evenings without replaying conversations in my head. I worked from a small desk near the window, sunlight cutting across pages of notes and open diagrams. Clients came through referrals, not pressure. They asked questions. They listened. Sometimes, I caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. It never did. Northbridge continued its quiet restructuring. Departments merged, projects paused, names disappeared from the website. Elliot's absence was permanent now, though no one said it outright. His influence lingered only in the systems he'd neglected, and those, too, were slowly replaced. One afternoon, a message arrived from an unfamiliar address. It was from Elliot. Short, careful, 2 sentences. He said he hadn't intended to hurt me. He said he was under impossible pressure. I read it once. Then again, I didn't respond, not out of anger, out of clarity. Some explanations arrive after they're useful. Some apologies are designed to ease the speaker, not heal the listener. I archived the message and closed my inbox. A week later, I was invited to speak at a small industry meetup. Nothing formal. A room with folding chairs and uneven lighting. I hesitated, then agreed. When I finished, a woman approached me, early in her career, nervous, but steady. I almost quit last month. She said, my manager kept taking credit for my work. I thought maybe that was just how it goes. She paused, but hearing your story helped me document everything. It helped me push back. I thanked her, and as she walked away, something shifted in me. This was the part no lawsuit could create. Not revenge, not exposure, impact. On the walk home, I realized how much I'd changed since the day I walked into that courtroom. I was still careful, still precise, but I was no longer afraid of being seen. I owned my work, I owned my name, and I trusted myself again. That night, I opened a fresh document and wrote a single line at the top: never let someone else define the value of what you build. I saved it, closed my laptop, and sat in the quiet, because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it stays and waits. A year passed without ceremony. No anniversary, no reminder notification. Just time doing what time does best, separating noise from truth. Northbridge Systems faded into the background of industry conversations, mentioned only when someone referenced a cautionary example of governance gone wrong. Elliot's name surfaced once in a trade article, buried deep in a paragraph about leadership turnover. I didn't click it. I didn't need to. My world had narrowed in the best possible way. Fewer meetings, fewer explanations, more intention. I worked with people who understood that trust isn't a slogan. It's a system you build carefully and maintain honestly. Some evenings, I still thought about that courtroom. Not the ruling, not the gavel, but the moment Elliot laughed. I understood it now. He laughed because he believed power lived in perception, in posture, in who looked prepared and who didn't. He never imagined that truth could be quiet, that preparation could look ordinary, that control could exist without an audience. That misunderstanding cost him everything. One afternoon, while reviewing a project proposal, I caught my reflection in the darkened screen of my laptop. Same woman, same sharp eyes, but steadier, unapologetic. I thought about the version of myself who had walked into that courtroom carrying doubt, along with a worn computer and a bag of documents. She hadn't known how it would end. She only knew she couldn't stay silent. That was enough. I closed the file, sent a short approval email, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the street unremarkable. Life, finally, felt proportional again. Later that night, I received a message from a former colleague, someone still navigating a system that didn't value her voice. "How did you know when to fight?" she asked. I took my time answering. "You don't always know," I wrote back. "You just know when staying quiet costs more than speaking." I shut the laptop and let the silence settle. Winning didn't feel like triumph. It felt like alignment. No one applauded. No one apologized publicly. But my name remained intact. My work spoke clearly. And the fear that once followed me from room to room no longer had a place to stand. That was the real ending. Not the fall of a man who laughed too soon, but the rise of someone who refused to disappear. And that kind of victory doesn't fade. It stays. I learned that dignity doesn't need permission. It only needs courage. How did this story make you feel? And which moment stayed with you the most? Where are you listening from right now? If it spoke to you, please leave a comment, tap like, share it with someone who needs it. And subscribe to stay with these stories. 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 Stay with these